Hello and welcome to the Play Review with me, Douglas Schatz.
And me, Jodi Rylett.
Hi, Jodi.
Hi, Douglas.
Welcome back from Cornwall.
Thank you very much.
I'm in rainy Scotland. Is it raining in London?
Right now, the sun is shining. It feels like proper autumn. I quite like this time of year.
Yes. Well, I'm up near the Arctic Circle here somewhere where the days are going to be very short. Anyway, we were lucky enough, in fact, before we both went away, to be invited to see Elephant at the Bush Theatre in West London last week. Elephant is a one-woman show written and performed by Anoushka Lucas. Anoushka is a very talented singer, songwriter, actor, and writer. As an actor, she's appeared in Oklahoma at the Young Vic, Henry V at the Donmar, and Afterlife at the National, among other things. I saw her in Jesus Christ Superstar at the Open Air Theatre in Regent's Park, where she was a wonderful Mary. She's also written musical scores for other shows and released an album of her own music entitled Dark Soul. Elephant is her first play, which was first seen at the Bush last year and now returns in a new expanded version. So, Jodi, perhaps we could start by explaining what the form of this show is and what it's about.
Sure. So we're in the round at the Bush, and what we see is a sunken circle in the middle of the floor, and there's a piano, and it's a one-woman story about Lila, young Lila, from being 7 years old to the present day. She's a musician, and she's a diligent daughter of second-generation immigrants. And she has been granted a bursary to go to a very elite school in London. There's so much going on in this play about identity, about belonging, about music, about the music industry and the need to package and put people into little boxes. And it jumps around beautifully in time, and she has a lovely way of inhabiting those ages. And it projects on the wooden floor the date to help us along. Although I'm not sure we really needed it, because you could tell from her voice when she was being 7-year-old Lila. And whenever she took to the piano, which she did with such great ease, the piano is central to the story and to the performance of the show. And she will just sit down at that piano, and as she begins to play, there's a very slow revolve. So we all get to see her. It's a deceptively very simple show that started off being nice enough and I thought would be a pleasant evening at the theatre, and ends up being very complex and nuanced and powerful.
Yes, well, we'll come to the powerful bits, but you're right, she's very talented, accompanying her stories, which one assumes, I guess, maybe semi-autobiographical. It's a young woman, mixed race, who's a singer-songwriter trying to make her way in the music industry, as you said. And she goes to private school, and where she's the only girl with brown skin. And she comes from a different class. She lives in a council flat, not on an estate, she's quick to point out, because I think sensitivity to class identity is very much one of the themes of the play, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. They live in a terraced house in Hammersmith, so in a quite nice part of London.
But she goes to the posh school where the relatively affluent lifestyle of all the other girls is very unfamiliar to her. This is beautifully captured by a riff at one point on the different words people have for what we most commonly call the living room.
Yeah.
We have other words like lounge, the parlor, sitting room, front room, the drawing room even.
Whatever that is.
Yeah, which is not a term she knows. But she points out, and this is what defines the differences, is that none of these describe the room that they live in, because the room they have is somewhere where they eat, sleep at the same time.
Yes, that's the mum and dad's bedroom. It's the living room, the eating room, and also a bedroom. And the parents very much encourage her that education is the way out. That narrative that's very common in second, third generation immigration children around education being the way out, and you've got to be better than everybody else. And it's very sweetly relayed, that, because it's all through in the voice of her 7-year-old self. So it's in a very innocent way, sort of, Mummy says that the harder I work, the more money I'll get from the French government. And beautifully, she inhabits her mother's voice and she slips into this fluent French. And you imagine this formidable French mother and this cool, laid back dad. I thought she did that beautifully.
Yes, because she is mixed race. She tells us that her several grandparents were from India, Cameroon, and Dorset. And she reflects all of that by taking on the voices, as you said, of her parents at least. And you're right about the dates on the floor. I didn't even notice them for a while. And we certainly didn't need to because, as you rightly say, she inhabits the character of the girl at different ages beautifully. And in fact, as we've said as well, that, she just slips into playing the piano and singing her own songs, which in their own right are a delight.
Yes, they are.
I was going to ask you about the title of the play, because it took a little while before we get a connection to these personal stories of her childhood and her musical career. So where does the title Elephant come into this?
So at first I thought it was a metaphorical elephant in the room, and perhaps that is it to an extent. I don't see colour kind of thing, potentially. It becomes apparent through the description of the piano and talking about the ivory on the keys of the piano and where that comes from, what happens to the elephant, the agony and the pain that the elephant has to go through for this thing of beauty to be made, these beautiful trophies that sit in the lounges and living rooms and parlours.
The drawing rooms.
All across Europe. We think they're beautifully crafted European items, but they are born of the blood of African soil.
Yes, she has this horrific description of the tusk being ripped out of the elephant's face to get at the ivory. It's also, of course, a symbol of colonialism, which is another one of the themes of the play, because the piano is also made of mahogany, which she reminds us is cut down in the Caribbean by slaves. And the cleared land is then made into plantations. And she tells us a story about a boyfriend who she falls for, who's a drummer in a band, but whose parents are from another social class. They have a cottage in the country.
Oh, I forgot that, yes.
Which happens to have 9 bedrooms.
9-bedroom cottage.
And a grand piano, of course, sitting in the drawing room. And her boyfriend's father grew up on a farm in Kenya,
which is very much the way they pronounced it.
Yes. And his grandmother refers to her as a quadroon. That raised alarm bells for me because I remembered seeing Octoroon.
Yeah, Brandon Jacobs. Yeah.
Yeah, a wonderful play by Brandon Jacobs Jenkins that was on at the Orange Tree in the National a few years back, which is 1/8 white, and she's 1/4 white. But anyway, it's a disparaging term, clearly.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of associations with colonialism there. And then another one of the themes or strands of stories she tells is about her experience in the music industry, which is also not very edifying, is it, Jodi?
It really isn't. And again, that was very beautifully done. We knew we were in 2017 that she was in the presence of music producers, and we're now interested in signing her. And they kind of came as a voice of God, into the general ether, and she's looking up.
Yeah, there were voiceovers, aren't they, of record company executives.
Yes.
Talking to her about how they want to package and market her.
That's right. And it starts with a meet and greet. We're so excited to meet you. There's a lot of buzz. And of course, she's excited at this, but also she physically shows the power dynamic of this by making herself very small and looking up at these voices that are coming from the ceiling or the walls, and she climbs on and around the piano. It's very, very well done, the way that she embodies that bending herself out of shape as they're saying things like, they're trying to slice and dice her and package her. Can you be a bit more Alicia Keys? We haven't had an English one of those. So she can't just be herself. And could we play up the working class angle? You don't sound very working class.
Yes.
Because, of course, she speaks with this beautiful cut glass English accent, back to Pygmalion.
Yes, there's that wonderful invention that conveys her discomfort with the fact that these executives want to turn her into something that she's not. Because every time they're talking about her, as you said, she's contorting her body as she climbs onto the piano. So it's painful for her.
Yes.
That they're wrenching her about in this way and trying to redefine her. And the irony, as you rightly say, is she's sent to this private school and she spends all her time trying to become like them, trying to speak like them. As you referenced Pygmalion, she's learning to try to fit in to a class that she doesn't come from.
Yes.
And also to a Britain that she feels like she needs to change herself to be part of and to succeed in. And that's where I think the play really is most telling ultimately, as you said at the beginning, we start with these personal stories, which are interesting enough. But there's this moment towards the end of the play where she gives this rousing speech. It's a fantastic diatribe full of anger at the racial politics and social politics of the world that she's grown up in and that she's inherited and suffered with. And it's incredibly articulate. It actually slightly jumps out of the play. In a way, you're thinking, oh my God, this is now a speech.
Yes.
But it is so beautifully written and delivered that it becomes the most important part of the play, I think.
And the reason I felt that it didn't come across like, oh, this is the speech, was because it was entirely consistent with her character and what was happening in that part of the story.
Yeah, she'd earned it, hadn't she?
Yeah, she'd earned it because she'd taken us through these several iterations of, so she'd gone off to Oxford and then took us through all these iterations of the music industry where she's clearly talented. They clearly want to sign her, but she's not right. And she's learning more and more that she's not anybody's right, that she can't fit in whatever box anybody ever wants. And then finally, she's taken to Leo, her boyfriend's family seat, surrounded by this colonial past. And it just all comes out. It's the final straw. So it worked for me. And I also think the way that she delivered it felt like a woman in her 20s would deliver it, like finally all just coming out in one big splurge.
Yes, with great passion. She's angry because she's had to pretend to be someone other than she is.
Yeah.
And she thought that by pretending to be white middle class, in inverted commas, she could go out into the world and do anything she wanted. The world would be her oyster, she says. But she realizes that no matter how well she pretends, she'll never be allowed to be fully part of this world. A world where, this is a great line, she is tired of being a guest. And I found that so telling, that line.
Yeah. Tired of being a guest, being tolerated.
Yeah, a guest in this country, and therefore raising the question, who does this country belong to? Why does she feel disenfranchised? And that is, to me, the most important part of seeing this piece, really, is that we live in a multicultural society, and I think it makes us understand what it feels like to be disenfranchised in that society, because, you know, there are many still not willing to truly recognize or try to make this multicultural society work, including perhaps our current Home Secretary, dare I say.
Yeah, the powerful piece in that for me was that she almost wasn't trying or pretending to be middle class, or certainly wasn't conscious of doing so, because as a little girl that she was growing up that way, she was in those homes, she knew that her home circumstances were different, but otherwise, you know, she gets into Cambridge like the rest of them do. She's clever, she can get through it, it's all good. It's the terrible shock to her as she starts to realize stage by stage that she doesn't belong in that way. She says something like, my life can only exist in very narrow spaces set by other people. And in order to fit into any of those spaces, I have to cut myself up into tiny marketable parts like a tusk. It's so good.
Yes, because she also talks about the record company people who are trying to package her with her ethnic background and all that these are the parts that they want to market, but that they've made her ashamed of at the same time. This world, of course, is prejudiced against her being Black, working class, or Asian.
Yes.
And yet they're sort of trying in a superficial way to think, oh, yeah, well, we can market that.
That's exactly what we're looking for.
Yeah, but you're not really allowed to be part of this society in any other way.
No, exactly, because it doesn't fit. Can't you be a bit more street? She doesn't dress the way they expect her to.
Yeah. It was heartbreaking, but I was also full of admiration for her because it's full of justified anger and passion and very articulate.
Yeah, it felt so true.
And if you're not, as I'm not, from that world, I don't come from where she comes from. Therefore, seeing the world through her eyes is really important. And I think that's what theater does.
Yeah.
And I applaud the Bush, as I did when I covered Red Pitch on the Play podcast, for their programming that in this play, for providing a place for diverse voices to be heard that can help address and redress the imbalances in our creative industries and society as a whole. So I think, you know, those are reasons that one should go and see this show, other than that it's beautifully performed.
Yeah, definitely. And I think she's been also nominated for the most promising new playwright. I mean, front of the queue for talent, this woman. So definitely, if you haven't been fortunate enough to see her, she has such a presence. And she just seems so very natural with it.
Yes, very impressive performer, but also, as we've seen, something to say too.
Yeah.
So if you can, go and see Elephant. It's running at the Bush until the 4th of November. Thank you, Jodi.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, listeners, for being with us for another play review. Bye-bye until next time.
Bye. See you next time.
We'd love to hear what you think, so please visit theplaypodcast.com to share your comments or email us at plays@theplaypodcast.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time.